If you were like me, having grown up in the late 2000s into the 2010s, then you may have come across the multitude of Flash games scattered throughout the internet. Whether it was for shows, toys, or something unique, you could find them almost anywhere. Unfortunately, due to its death back in 2020, these games aren't as easily accessible as they were then. However you access them now, whether by finding a site that's integrating Ruffle or via Flash Archive, they still live on. You have the popular sites like Newgrounds, Cool Math, Armor Games. Wherever your main hub is, there's some hidden gems that may still be out there. I want to share some of them with you, some of which may not have been found on other sites. This is Dark Dungeon, a retro RPG adventure that was released sometime between 2011 and 2012. To this day, I have zero clue who the actual developer of this game was, as there were no credits. Unfortunately, the only place that this game could be found and played on was a website that is mainly related to Boy Scouts. That aside, I have poured so much time and playthroughs of this game, and only very few of them have made it through the entire way. The premise is relatively simple. You'll traverse a floor and search for a stairway down to the next level. As you go from room to room, treasure chests containing loot may help you in your venture. But be warned, enemies lurk in the shadows. Aside from equipment, you'll also find spells that you can use to alter your stats or gain the upper hand during enemy encounters. There are only 3 playable characters, each with a different strength. First up, the Warrior. Strong offense, and has a spell to briefly increase his abilities. This class is recommended for those new to the game, so that way you can get your footing. Next is the Rogue. If you like being stealthy, then this character is right up your alley. He is able to perform a backstab for high damage if you can catch your enemy by surprise, but you may get discovered. Just make sure to think methodically, as it will be crucial to your survival. And lastly is the Wizard. The spells you obtain will recharge quickly to keep foes at bay, but can be pretty weak up close. This class will take a lot of trial and error to fully understand and master. If you couldn't tell by now, this is absolutely Dungeons & Dragons territory. What makes it so fun is because the game ensures there's replay value. Each time you start a new game, it's a different layout and spread of loot. By that point, it was really up to your luck and strategy to make it through the floor. The difficulty ramps up quickly once you go from the upper levels to the lower, and let me tell you, the enemies can be quite unforgiving. You get 3 lives per adventure, and once your last life is lost, it's back to the beginning with no continues. Although lacking in a wider range of characters, you can customize your adventurer to suit your liking. Better equipment and spells are likely to show up as you progress, some of them even getting a modifier to briefly increase other stats. You'll also come across potions that will boost your abilities for a brief time. Keep them handy, as sometimes they're sparse compared to equipment. As for spells, they'll recharge depending on the level of a correlating stat, or just by exploring. Keep an eye out for how much longer you may need, so that way you don't spend time waiting. The only critiques I have with this game is how there are some aspects that could have been fleshed out. One example is the use of currency in this game. You'll earn coins from duplicates, excluding spells, destroying loot in your inventory, or when your character decides how powerful a weapon or piece of equipment is compared to what they currently have. Sometimes you'll get not half as good, or my current weapon is just as good. The coins don't go towards anything special, and are kind of a useless feature to have. If the game were to be expanded, there should have been shops or something to spend them on. Another would be how the leveling system works. Each enemy you take down grants you XP, which increases your health upon reaching the next level. Unfortunately, that's all it does, and you'd have to rely on your equipment to get a minor boost to your remaining stats. Had this been given more thought, the later levels will be a bit easier to take on, rather than getting overwhelmed. Despite these flaws, Dark Dungeon holds its place in being one of my top 5 most addicting and most memorable Flash games. Whizzball! This game was created and only playable on what was Discovery Kids back in the early 2000s. It's a simple 3D puzzle game where you'll build courses to guide a ball towards a target. After inputting a username, you get the option to build your own courses or see what other users have created and put them together yourself. The difficulty of these levels range from being easy to learn all the way to being ridiculously complicated. Basically, you would need to figure out what went where using as few hints as possible. By using a hint, it would affect the bonus you get after solving the puzzle. It was very unique for what it was, as at the time, there were a lot of moving pieces. They had conveyor belts, adjustable catapults, and a teleporter animation that included a UFO transport. While it may not offer anything more than that, it holds a place in my heart for what it was, especially with how much freedom you were given. By making your own puzzles, you could share them with the community, and they would rate your puzzle by creativity and difficulty. This one's near and dear to my heart. Even after beating this game, I had to keep coming back. This is the R.I.F.T, made by the Super Flash Bros back in 2009 for Armor Games. It's a little time travel shooter with its journey through the ages. Within the clouds lived a family of creatures known as Whistle Knights. These creatures sought to protect their only treasure, which was the Arrow of Time, and had essentially destroyed each other until one remained. With a bow as your only weapon, your goal is to defend the Sky Fortress from aerial threats. The game is mousepad and trackball friendly, so that way you can control where you shot and how much power it took. After completing the first level, serving as the tutorial, you'd unlock arrow effects. These effects would help you to clear enemies with less fuss. Like the face of a clock, you have 12 different effects, ranging from a simple element to manipulating your enemies and making quick work of them. Along with arrow effects, you'd also have the option to get a second line of defense. These last until broken, and can help to increase your rating at the end of the level. At the end of each era, you'll face a boss fight before moving on to the next. And in each era, you'll note the advance in technology and music to note what era was being experienced. Playing through this game has always been fun, and to me, is a timeless classic. Pun unintended. Competing with the Arrow of Time for the most impactful soundtrack is Flight, a game about throwing paper airplanes. What starts as a young girl wanting her Christmas wish to come true turns into an international journey from around the world. Flying through the air, you'll collect stars that convert to cash, which you can use to upgrade your paper airplane. For something as simple as that, this game was really thought out. Origami cranes multiplying your earnings, pinwheels along the ground to give you a last-second boost. They'd even give a stalling warning if you flew too high. In terms of upgrades, it was also realistic for having a booster, aerodynamics, different paper airplane styles. The list goes on. As for the music, it's the main theme. I'm feeling lovely. And the in-game theme itself, Soaring in the Stars. Music-wise, this is probably the most feel-good and nostalgic Flash game that has ever been done. Though, I'm sure there's plenty more where that came from. During the 2010s, I had found a site called Pogo, which housed card games, word games, and puzzle games. There were a few I had played there, but the main ones I got attached to were Monopoly, the World Edition, and Battleship. Even if they were online versions of the realistic counterparts, what made them stick out was for how the game was brought to life. For Monopoly, it utilized a lot of its concepts which may not get used during the actual board game. Mortgaging, auctioning, trading offers. I never did any of that. One specific thing about playing this game was that it also included a net worth value. This was only used if you chose to end the game early and nominate a winner. The idea of net worth isn't mentioned in the board game's instructions, as it's not really an option for some versions of the board game. All of that aside, this game was jam-packed with animations and certain features that made the game less monotonous as watching pieces go around the board. It showed who had what properties, the rent being owed to another player, pass and go. It just felt better to play the game this way. For Battleship, it was played in a custom salvo mode. You'd get 5 shots, equaling how many ships in your fleet were afloat. In addition to that, you could also find power-ups to gain an advantage, such as a torpedo or heavy shot to use on your next turn. In special cases, you could also find a reinforcement ship to give you an extra shot. If you were to obtain 2 or more power-ups in a row during a turn, they would become heat-seeking missiles, which make a direct hit. Much like Monopoly, it also came with its own set of animations, like watching a ship sink, and also had reactions to certain events, like earning a power-up or missing your shots. You know, to think that there were so many Flash games that I'd gone through and played, several of them had stood out and made themselves memorable. Even with Flashpoint Archive and Ruffles integration, there's still some Flash games out there that might not have made it through, or just haven't been resurrected yet. But maybe one day, they'll get their chance to shine again. Thanks for watching. This is the first time that I've really tried to do this kind of thing. I do have some more ideas in mind, so keep an eye out. If you want to support the channel, consider subscribing. And I'll see you in the next video. Until then.